all the information that you receive when you get a federal award, that information is now standardized. Again, to our theme of standardizing information throughout the life cycle of the grant. You'll see that same information is required for pass-through entities to provide to a subrecipient, so that subrecipients know, hey, this is not just any award from the state, this is actually part of a federal award, and you have that same information throughout. This is the big new one, provide an indirect cost rate. This is new, so now pass-through entities are required to provide an indirect cost rate to subrecipients. And there are a couple different ways that this can happen. If the subrecipient has a federally negotiated indirect cost rate, that is the rate that the pass-through entity must provide. They must reimburse the subrecipient at their federally negotiated rate. If the subrecipient does not have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate, the pass-through entity either may negotiate a rate if both parties have the capacity and are interested in negotiating, or they may provide a de minimis rate of 10% of modified total direct costs. So you have two options there. And again, that's intended really to remove that barrier to entry for those smaller organizations that haven't had a federally negotiated indirect cost rate, that otherwise may not ever get one, that because they may not get one, may not even really be able to compete or financially handle administering that award without any of their indirect costs being covered. So again, it's a small step. It's meant to be the floor, not the ceiling. Ideally, everyone would get to negotiate, but we understand not everyone has the resources. So 3 options there. The next requirement, perform risk assessment for subrecipient monitoring. Now, this is not a new requirement to perform a specific type of risk assessment. What this means is that the pass-through entity has the discretion to determine how they will provide oversight for that subaward. Maybe they're going to require reports once a week, maybe once a month, maybe once a year, maybe they're going to do site visits, maybe they're not. That pass-through entity has the discretion because as far as the federal government is concerned, they're making an award to that pass-through entity, they're holding that pass-through entity responsible for performance. It's up to the pass-through entity if they want to make a sub-award or not and how they manage that award. So all this says is, hey, when you make that award, when you decide how to do that oversight, make that decision based on risk. It doesn't mean you have to require a specific form or anything like that, but this is just that theme that you now see woven throughout the guidance, using that principle of risk to make decisions about how you're going to manage your federal awards. So that goes throughout. Verify compliance for audit requirements. Now, if a subrecipient has a single audit done, and say there's a finding on a federal award, the federal agency will do the audit resolution, issue the management decision for that finding on the federal award. If there's a finding on a subaward, it's the pass-through entity's responsibility to resolve that audit finding for the subaward that they provided. So that's all that means. It doesn't make the pass-through entity responsible for the entire audit the subrecipient has. Just means if you make a subaward, if there's an audit finding on that subaward, that's the pass-through entity's responsibility to provide that oversight. And then finally, there are requirements under the Transparency Act to report all subawards into the Federal Spending Transparency Portal, FSRS. So you have that requirement as well. And the last administrative requirement before we move to cost principles is closeout. And the new language here makes it a little bit more clear. You have 1 year, federal agencies have 1 year to close out awards, and in particular, non-federal entities have 90 days at the end of the period of performance to submit all final reports. You probably will have seen there's been a lot of interest in Congress over the past few years looking at awards that haven't been closed out, funds that haven't been dispersed, kind of unobligated balances sitting in agencies and at pass-through entities. So there's a big push to make sure, hey, we appropriated this money, let's make sure that those awards are getting made and that those funds are getting dispersed. And then when it's over, let's make sure we're closing it up, tying up the bow, and making sure those funds are accounted for. So that's the kind of final piece of the cycle there.